All right, fellas, we're going to do a little bit of a wiring how-to video, some basics of wiring. We're going to cover a relay because that seems to kick everybody's ass. Um, to start with, as far as the relay and the pigtail goes, um, 4 or 5 pin relay. Doesn't matter which one. We don't use the 5th pin, but 5 pin relays are common. There's a part number for the one you can get at the part store just about any day of the week. There are other ones, you can get them on Summit and Jegs and what have you. This is typically the go-to. If you look at it, it says 30-40 amp relay. Most of them will. Like this is another one. That was 30 amp. Most will say 30-40. That means it'll take 40 on the hit and then sustain 30 without an issue. Just about everything electrical takes a little more power to start it, and then once it's started, then the amp draw drops some. So that is the relay that we use most often. This is the pigtail that we use most often. Also a 5 pin pigtail. We'll come back to that stuff in a minute. Before we get into wiring that, we're going to talk about basics of a good wiring connection. We use Texel wire from ProWire. 14 gauge covers most stuff. 14 gauge is going to be able to cover more amp draw and power more things than a lot of the 12 gauge from the part store. Just a higher quality, better wire. Also, the insulation's better. If we were to take a torch to this, for a small period of time, and you'll see those stuff wipes off, whereas the part store shit, it'll crumple off. So it's better quality stuff. It's Texel wire, TXL. We get it from ProWire. You can also get it from a bunch of other places, but ProWire is our favorite. And like I said, if you buy it in bulk, then typically it's cheaper than the part store wire. So first off, we're going to start with a good mechanical connection. This is what kicks most people's ass. We're going to start with stripping it. These are some good strippers, Nippic strippers. These are Henry's. I steal them all the time because I enjoy them. But if you have the old school style, they will work. Just make sure you're not stripping off any more than you need to and getting into your strands. So stripping a little bit off of each end, real simple deal. These are the crimps that we use. Closed barrel, no seam. They have a little stop in the middle. Very simple deal. Make sure that the wires aren't frayed out or messed up. Insert like that, and see that little bit of a lip it's got there, a little bit of a gap. It doesn't seat all the way. We don't want it to seat all the way. That gives us strain relief. If that insulation is all the way up against there or in there, when it pivots a little bit, the insulation is going to push against here instead of the wires bending, and it's more prone to break around the edges. So a little bit of a gap is totally fine in what we're going for. Crimpers and crimp tools. This is what we use fairly often for barrel crimps. We also have a handful of other ones for Delphi connectors and stuff like that, but this is what we use most of the time. These ones are great because they will not let you let off until you have crimped it all the way. So sometimes it gets a little annoying, but it is in fact handy. So we do our first connection. If this was a point where this was connected to something and our other wire was connected to something, this is where we would slip on our shrink wrap, because you don't want to miss that part. Not the case here. We've got 2 ends, so we're going to go ahead and crimp both ends. And again, leaving a little bit of room for strain relief there. And before we even do anything else, that is a good mechanical connection. That is not going anywhere. We can't pull it apart. A lot of times cars come here where customers did a bunch of wiring. Henry sees those part store crimps with the blue insulation on them. You know what I'm talking about? They've got the blue plastic around the crimp. Somebody crimped them with some channel locks. First thing he does is start giving them all a tug test, and they usually just come apart. You can see with this type of a combo, that does not happen. Now another layer of protection that we add to this is our adhesive line shrink wrap. Also something you can get at ProWire and many other places. But this stuff, it actually has glue on the inside. It's a little bit more durable. We slip it over. We try to find the center. And then I like to use a heat gun. You can use a torch. This is easiest way to not mess things up. not overcook it. Battery's a little bit dead on this thing, so it's not going to be the quickest process here, but we will get through it. Alright, so basically it's hard to get a better connection than that. Like I said, this stuff has glue on the inside of it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on the camera in the light, but see, it looks a little wet right there. This stuff, once this stuff cools, you can put a cut in it, it's not going to peel off. You could cut it seam-wise, you know, and it's not coming off. Best way to do it, it's waterproof, weatherproof, very durable. When you get hot, it just shrinks more. So that is the way we want to do all of our connections. If you don't have crimpers like this, that is fine. You'll get in a pinch and you'll have to use something like this sometimes. These are some snap-ons a buddy got me a while ago. Work like a champ in many cases. These stay in my track bag because they'll get you through a pinch and take care of a lot of things for you. The biggest thing is, once you get done with your connection, you need to pull on that thing like you're trying to make it come apart. Because, and some people, oh, you know, what if it does? Well, then you need to know, okay? So that's our solid point there, right? So that's our basics of our wiring. If we are putting a handful of wires together, you want to stagger your splices. You do not want a bundle. One, it looks like shit. Two, it's not going to pass through places you want to. Three, it makes it a little less serviceable if you ever got to mess with one. And also, obviously, that adhesive line shrink wrap, as great as it is not as good as this insulation. So, you know, we want to stagger those. You know, we'll have one splice there, another splice here, another splice here, and that makes it all just lay more uniform. It looks better inside the insulation or inside the conduit, or, you know, whatever it is you're using. So that covers that. Next, we're going to get to our relay. Like I said, 4 or 5 pin relay and pigtail does not matter. We're not using the middle one. Typically, I pull that middle pin out. Very simple. There's a tab on the back side we're going to press, and it pulls out. Give you a little better of a look here. See that little tab? That's what's grabbing. So sticking something down in there and pressing that tab in allows us to pull it out. Don't need it, toss it. Our relay. Relays, like I said, we have 4 pins we're going to use. We have 85, 86, 30, and 87. 30 and 87 are the 2 most important ones. I mean, all 4 play a vital role, but those are the 2 you want to go for first and mark first, because that is your load. The purpose of a relay is basically, this is just a switch. This allows us to move, you know, 30 or 40 amps of current, you know, but still trigger the accessory with something that can't move that much current. So this just needs to have a small amount of power flow through it to trigger the relay. This is a hop switch. We use this for kicking on, you know, secondary fuel pumps and meth and all kinds of stuff, right? So, but things like this and the switches in the car, they can't carry a ton of current, you know, so we can't run straight from the battery to our switch or this or whatever, you know, our trigger is with, you know, 30 or 40 amps, and it lasts. It'll kill it. They're not made for that. A relay is how we take care of that. So basically, our 30 and our 87, you can look at them. The pins are labeled right on here, right? If you, usually the first thing I do, even though I've done it a million times, I identify which ones are which. I put up my 30 and my 87 up and down from each other, orient pigtail like that, and then we know this is our 30 and 87, right? It's our red and our yellow. These are going to be what goes from our battery to our accessory. So this, for our visual purposes, is our battery. This is 12 volts all the time. And then this is what we want to give 12 volts to, our accessory, our fuel pump, water pump, what have you. These two, it doesn't matter which way these go. 30 and 87, 30 can be the battery, or 87 can be the battery. When I say battery, it can also be an alternator. It can be the post coming off the alternator at the fuse box. You know, the closest to the alternator, the best, as long as it's, you know, a good volt source. Alternator power is good, battery is good. Any big block, distribution block is going to be good. But 30 or 87 is going to be the first leg. The opposite side is going to your accessory. These are where we normally run big gauge wire. You know, you can tie a fuse in, never a bad idea. But the other two are where we trigger, right? So there's many different ways to do this. The way I do this, and the way we've been doing it for a long time, and some people might argue, I don't care, it's been working for us for years, right? You need power and ground. Once we have power on one leg and ground on the other, then it allows power to flow through the relay into our accessory. So you can constantly ground one or constantly put power to one and then switch it on. So in most cases, I will put constant 12 volts to it. So basically you can just put these two together. So now basically our 85 can just come off our switch. So this can be our pressure switch. Our pressure switch can have power going to one pin, this going to the other. So once it sees 2 psi, it gets grounded and lets power flow through. But that is basically how that works. You know, big gauge wire on 30 and 87 to the battery. You can also ground this one, you know, and if it's something that's 12 volts is going to trigger it, totally fine if you want to tie it off a fuse box or something like that. But that's how you want to do that. Ground your accessory and ground your accessory wherever you're going to ground it at. You know, have your relay 30 and 87, battery to accessory. Pick if you want a constant ground or constant hot one of your legs and use the other one to trigger. And this is basically just a switch. So that's how all that works. If anybody has any other questions on basics of wiring or even more advanced wiring stuff, you know, we do a lot of work with Deutsch connectors. They're super easy and make life simple and clean things up quite a bit. So you guys let me know and we will continue on from there.